Section 6.3. In this section, you will see questions like this. Circle true or false for each of the following 5 statements. For example, in question A, the oboe usually plays at a lower pitch than the bassoon. Is that true or false? Or in question B, the horn is a woodwind instrument. Is that true or false? To answer questions like this, first we need to know what the orchestral instruments are and how are they divided into different families. There are a couple of families in an orchestra. The first is the string families, and these are instruments that produce sounds by bowing or plucking the strings, and this includes violin, viola, cello, double bass, as well as the harp. Then we have the woodwind family, which are instruments that produce sound by blowing through a hole or through a reed. A reed is a thin piece of bamboo attached to some instruments. On these instruments, such as the clarinet, oboe, and bassoon, you blow through a reed to make it vibrate, and the vibration will be amplified by the instrument so that it makes a musical pitch. On the other hand, a flute is an instrument that does not have a reed and only have a hole that you blow through in order to make a sound. For the reed instruments, it's important to note that there are 2 kinds of reed instruments. The first is the single reed instrument, and this applies to the clarinet, whereas the double reed instruments include the oboe and the bassoon. Next, we have the family of brass instruments, which produce sound by vibrating one's lips into a mouthpiece. And the last orchestral family, we have the percussion instruments, and they divide into 2 kinds of instruments, the definite pitch percussion and the indefinite pitch percussion. The definite pitch percussion are percussion instruments that produce a definite pitch, for example, a xylophone, a marimba, or the timpani. They can all produce a definite pitch that you can hear as the note A, B, C, etc. As for the indefinite pitch instruments, these include instruments such as the snare drum, the bass drum, the triangle, and tambourine, etc. These instruments can only produce noise, and you cannot tell what musical pitch they are producing. And in a broader sense, anything that can produce sound by being struck, shaken, or scraped all belong to the family of percussion. Apart from the standard orchestral instruments, we also have the choir, which consists of several voice types. For the female voices, we have the soprano as the highest voice, followed by mezzo-soprano, which is the middle of the female voice, and the alto, which is the lowest of all. As for the male voices, we have the highest voice, the tenor, and the middle voice, the baritone, and the lowest voice, the bass. Also, I hope you still remember the transposing instruments in an orchestra, which we have already discussed in more detail in an earlier video. And these include the instruments that sound a major second lower than the written pitch, the trumpet in B flat and clarinet in B flat. And we also have instruments that sound a minor third lower than the written pitch, the clarinet in A. Lastly, we also have instruments that sound a perfect fifth lower than written, and these include the horn in F and cor anglais. However, apart from these instruments, we also have 2 more transposing instruments that we haven't talked about. The first one is the piccolo, which sounds an octave higher than written. And then we have the double bass, which sounds an octave lower than the written pitch. As a summary, we have 4 families of orchestral instruments: the string, woodwind, brass, and the 2 kinds of percussion instruments, the definite pitch ones and the indefinite pitch ones. And in this table, I've also included the main clef that they use. For example, the viola uses the alto clef, and the double bass uses the bass clef. And there are at times other clefs that the instrument may use. For example, the cello would also use the tenor clef when it plays musical passages at a higher pitch. And in this table, I've also stated whether these instruments are transposing or not, as well as whether they can use mute and other features. It will be useful if you develop a visual memory of this table, because in the exam, as you saw in the questions just now, they do ask you different things about these instruments. and the answers are often quite obvious once you know this table inside out. To help you memorize these better, I've also included a list of videos in which professional musicians introduce their own instruments. At the end of the day, while this is all optional, it's probably easier when you can actually hear and see these instruments. So I'll just leave the playlist link in the description below, and you are free to check it out in your own time. Now, going back to these questions. The first one, the oboe usually plays at a lower pitch than the bassoon. And the answer is false, because the oboe is a higher pitch instrument than the bassoon. Second, the horn is a woodwind instrument, thus false, because it belongs to the brass family. Third, bass drum produces sounds of indefinite pitch. That's correct, because bass drum is a huge instrument that produces a loud bang at the low register when you hit it. And question D, the flute uses a single reed. That's false, because it doesn't have any reed. It only has a hole through which you blow to make a sound. Lastly, the horn in F sounds a perfect fifth lower than written, and that is correct. And that's how you deal with these questions. Remember, as with any memorization work, don't try to memorize everything in one go. Instead, try to spread it out across a few days or even a few weeks. That way it will be a lot more manageable and in fact a lot more fun as you try to memorize this information. If you're looking for some more practice, I'll highly recommend that you visit this interactive site where I've put together a lot of practice tests and mock papers with instant feedback. In the drill mode, you have access to all the questions section by section, so that you can focus on specific question types and practice them until you feel confident. There are virtually unlimited questions. In the exam mode, you have access to full papers in the exact format of the exam, with randomized questions each time. You have 2 hours to finish the complete paper, at the end of which you'll be given your score and feedback.